Morning, people. Morning, David. Morning, Ali. Morning, Eddie. Morning, Ruth. Morning, John, the van driving legend. Hey, morning, Nancy. Morning, Lorraine. Morning, John. Morning, Paul. Morning, Marty. Morning, Kirsty. Morning, BJ. Morning, Alexander. Morning, Ewan. Morning, Neil. Morning, Barbara. Morning, Sandra. Morning, Harry. Morning, Stella. Morning, Jacqueline. Morning, Lenny. Morning, wee bird. Morning, Jim. Morning, Colin. Morning, Alistair. Morning, Gary. Morning, Sarah. Morning, Susan. Morning, Fiona. Morning, Big Ray. Hey, morning, Jim. Okay, where we are. Nearly there, folks. Anyway, morning, people. Sorry about yesterday. Circumstances beyond my control. It seems to be happening a lot lately. We've had power outages, working the telephone exchange. I've been locked out my social media. Mondays are not going well for me, but we'll try our best. Anyway, there's enough of yous on board, so let's get this broadcast underway. It's Indie Truck TV. Put the truck in that home in its office in Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. It's a beautiful morning, but it's bloody well cold. It's 3 degrees. Not good. But hey, that's more like the weather should be for this time of year. So that's the weather for Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. You want to know what the weather's like where you are? Look at your rain bloody one day. All right, news of the 21st of the 11th, 2022. Better note for you and me as yesterday. All right, Monday started here in Scotland with two themes in the rags. Hope for teachers' pay deal to avert strikes and soft Brexit warnings. Okay, on hopes for teachers' pay deal here in Scotland, I'd like to see a settlement for the children's sake. A lot of children lost a lot of education time during the pandemic restrictions, and a teacher strike right now wouldn't help. But we'll get a wee bit more of that as we get into the broadcast. Okay, but the EIS, Scotland's largest teaching union, said it had positive constructive talks with the government over the weekend, and they're expecting to have an offer to put to their members today. Okay, as to warnings over soft Brexit, the warning comes from the right-wing loony rags, and specifically the Express. The Express is warning is over rumours that Rishi Sunak and his administration would like to realign the UK a bit closer with Europe, because they have realised that Brexit is a failed experiment, you know, and now they're looking for closer ties with the EU. Now, the story is that Sunak and his team want a Swiss-style arrangement with the EU. Now, the Swiss pay for access to the single market, and the price is quite high, as well as having to pay a monetary value to the single market. The Swiss also have to comply with EU regulations on goods and foods shipped into the European Union. Now, the one area where Switzerland doesn't comply with European law is the same area where the UK doesn't want to comply, or Westminster doesn't want to comply with EU law, and that's on banking, because the UK and Switzerland are huge tax havens and money laundromats for dodgy money. Right, so that's the two headlines in the rags of note. Rumours of a closer alignment with the EU and the possibility of the teacher strike being averted. Okay. On the closer alignment with the EU, we'll get a wee bit more of that as we go further in. Okay, so let's move on. Monday starts here in Scotland in the Pravda with a concocted story from the BBC. Now, they ran this story in 2014 and all, folks. I don't know if you know this, but this is a rerun of a story they did in the run-up to the last referendum. Anyway, the BBC have been giving the minutes to a meeting of NHS managers who were discussing funding models for the NHS. One numpty suggested we charge the wealthy citizens for access. Now, tier two, and that leads to speculation about two-tier health system. But there is already a two-tier health system here in the UK, where wealthier people pay for treatment. So there's a Davy says here. As I say, the two-tier health system's been here for as long as I can remember. The routes go to Harley Street in London, and this was widened out under successive Labour and Tory governments, which allowed the creation of private insurance sellers to move into the UK. And these medical insurance sellers direct their policy holders to private medical facilities here in the UK. The biggest one, of course, being Bupa. Everybody's heard of Bupa, and receive medical insurance adverts on the television every day. Now, it's become so common that multinationals, as well as other organisations here in the UK, offer up private medical insurance as a perk of the job. A great example of that would be Sky Television. Their employees get private medical insurance. There's other examples. It's even gone as far as getting into councils, where councils offer employees private medical insurance. So the two-tier system has been there for a long, long time. This idea of access to the UK to the NHS by paying for it, well, where do you think the private hospitals get their doctors from? The doctors have contracts with the NHS and with private healthcare insurers. It's one of the reasons why we have shortages in the NHS. A lot of our specialists and consultants' times are actually split between NHS duties and private healthcare duties. So, it already exists. But anyway, it's a concocted story. And in this concocted story, apparently the Scottish Government are thinking about charging the wealthy for access to the NHS. No. It's a made-up story, as was pointed out by the First Minister. The First Minister tells the Pravda, if this middle manager in the NHS wants to charge wealthy people for access to the NHS, then he better get himself elected to the office of First Minister, because policy isn't set in middle managers' meetings when they're shooting the breeze about funding. Policy is set in cabinet by ministers, and middle managers in the NHS are the ministers. So it was a made-up story, a bollock story, a scare story. SNP Green government, Scottish Government bad story. But it goes deeper than that, folks. And this is where you've got to sit up and pay attention. Right? The running down of the NHS in the press here in Scotland and across these islands is because a certain Tory government in Westminster wants to sell off the last of the family jewels, the NHS. A particular Prime Minister that we have at the moment, for those of you with short memories, Lord Chancellor of the Exchequer under Boris Johnson, spent a fair amount of his time with private health insurance companies in America. The current Chancellor under Rishi Sunak is Jeremy the Tory Hunt. He wrote a book on privatising the NHS. The decrying and running down of our services is deliberate. It is to make the people in England accept an insurance-based system. And here in Scotland, the running down of your NHS and the SNP can't run the NHS, the Scottish Government can't run the NHS. That is because the American healthcare providers don't just want Little England's NHS. They want the whole UK's NHS. So the decrying of the SNP Green government here in Scotland and the running down of our NHS, which is the best run NHS in these islands, is so that it can be taken away as a devolved competency. That way the whole of the UK's services can be offered up to American health insurance providers. This isn't rocket science, folks. By the way, under the Internal Market Bill, we will see the same thing happen in education as well. They're privatising their state schools down that road, even though the English people don't realise it. And of course, they want to do the same here. and the internal market bill, where everything's going to be the same throughout the UK market, including education, health, science, the bloody lot, agriculture, the lot will all be brought down to whatever's going on in England. Simple as that. It's no rocket science. We've been able to see the legislation being put in place. We've been able to see the defunding of the NHS. And we know what cowboys are in bloody government. We also know that 76 MPs and Tory Lords have interest in private healthcare companies. Okay, so what you're seeing here, folks, it's no rocket science. We know exactly what's happening. In England, they're defunding the NHS and decrying the NHS so they can honour out to private health insurers. Here in Scotland, the cuckoos in the nest and the Pravda are running down our NHS to give that lot in Westminster the excuse to be able to say, your NHS is crap, you couldn't run them a nodge. We're taking that back as a devolved competency. We're taking that away from you. It's no longer a devolved competency. And then, of course, we'll have a health insurance, an insurance-based healthcare system forced upon us. All right. So let's move on. That's what's happening with it. Well, that's why we've got all these NHS and education bad stories. They're going to take back competencies that they want to privatise from the Scottish Parliament. They tell us after the 2014 referendum that all that was left today was bayonet the wounded and strip that place along there to a talking shop with no more powers than a county council. I don't know if you realise, but in the budget statement, the fiscal policy statement by Hunt last week, he deliberately pointed that out when he decided it was going to devolve power to Essex and provide them with a mayor. That's their version of First Minister. And that's allowed them to say, you're just, Scotland, shut up, you're just another county council, another region like Manchester, like Liverpool, like London, like Essex. See, that's it. That's what's happening in front of your eyes, folks, if you can't see it. Right, moving on, Monday, and down that road, the PM, Rishi Sunak, family health care arrangements are under scrutiny. It turns out that the guy in charge of making decisions and policies for healthcare across England uses private healthcare. He doesn't use the NHS, and that is one of the problems down that road. The people who are making policies and running the NHS don't use the NHS. So they don't give a shite about it, but we've just spoke about that. Anyway, it's no surprise then that Sunak has got private health insurance and uses a private GP service doing that road. Now, the private GP service that Sunak uses charges £250 for a half-hour consultation, face-to-face, £150 for a video conference, and £500 for a home visit. But there's a lot of that goes on down there. London's biggest GP practice conglomerate is actually run by an American health insurance company. There you go. Right, so Sunak's healthcare arrangements are under scrutiny. Now, moving on. Okay, Monday down that road, scrutiny of Starmer's manifesto commitment to abolish the House of Lords is in the headlines. On Politics Sunday, or the Politics Show, or whatever it was Sunday, Sir Keir Starmer asked about the Labour Party's policy of abolishing the House of Lords. Keir Starmer says, abolition? No, we're talking about reform here, we're not talking about abolishing. So the presenter's a wee bit taken back, and he says, hold on a minute, you're talking about reform? Aye, we're talking about reform. He goes on to explain that Gordon Brown's looking at it for constitutional arrangements within the UK, and then he says, when he gets into power, he will commission a Royal Commission to look at it. Now, the last time they had a Royal Commission to look at reform in the House of Lords was in 1958. And because it's a Royal Commission, it goes before the House of Lords, and the House of Lords voted down the changes in that Royal Commission. Now, but Starmer is just blowing smoke up the English people's bahookies. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. The clue's in the name, Sir Keir Starmer. It's been a manifesto commitment of Labour to reform or abolish the House of Lords since 1910. The first reforms to the House of Lords happened in 1917 under a Liberal Democrat or a Liberal government at the time, and that was to kibosh the Lords' abilities to veto, believe it or not, right up in 1917, the House of Lords could veto a UK government budget. Further reforms came in 1948. The reforms to the House of Lords came after the Second World War when they wanted to bring in something called the welfare state. It meant nationalising key industries, and these key industries were all owned by the House of Lords. So their powers were curtailed, and these key industries were nationalised. We're talking about coal, railways, the creation of the NHS, creation of the benefit system. We're talking about power generators, all being taken into public hands. They were previously owned by these Tory lords. So there have been tinkering around the edges of the House of Lords for a long time by successive governments. But don't expect Labour to actually reform the House of Lords or to even democratise the House of Lords. It just ain't going to happen. Tony Blair tried it in 2003. The plans were shelved in 2005 because Tony Blair realised he might want to end up in the House of Lords someday. So Labour and reforming the House of Lords is just a bag of crap. It's a distraction, and it will never happen. Okay, moving on. Monday. Rishi Sunak, the English Prime Minister, is at the Confederation of British Industries Conference. Now, the CBI demanded Sunak ease access to immigration from the EU. Sunak tells them his government is fighting the illegal immigration and is not in the business of opening up immigration. So, taking back control of the borders, bollocks. As we all know, it's leaking like a sieve, and it's a smuggler's paradise because there's no checks being done at ports and stuff goes in and out. Right, Sunak was also asked about a greater alignment with the European Union to help businesses. And they're talking about the Swiss model we've just spoke about. Anyway, the Rishi Sunak tells the CBI he's got no intentions of changing the relationship with the EU if it meant having to align itself with EU laws and standards. Basically, what Sunak told the Confederation of British Industry yesterday was, suck it up, buttercups, you're going belly up and we don't give a shite. Simple as that. British industry, right across all the sectors, they're all dying, they're all screaming out for employees. But they're not opening the doors unless it's for India. Because remember at the G7 last week, Sunak granted middle-class Indians 3,000 visas a year to move to the UK. Right, also Monday, to rub salt into the wounds of the colony of Scotland amid ongoing austerity and budget constraints, the Chancellor in the Exchequer tells the English public that he expects to rape Scotland's resources for 96 billion quid over the next 2 years. He expects to take 80 billion in tax revenues from oil and gas over the next 2 years, and he expects to take 16 billion from the renewable sector in Scotland in the form of windfall taxes over the next 2 years. 96 billion quid of Scottish resources will be stolen, and the Scottish public is getting, the Scottish government and Scottish people are getting the budget to our public services cut. Our annual budget at this point in time for running the whole of Scotland from Westminster is 41.6 billion. The Chancellor is going to take in more than that in taxes from our resources over the next 2 years. The Scottish budget will decline over the next 2 years, dropping from 41.6 to 40.1 billion next year, and going forward it will drop by 2% for the next 5 years. Meanwhile, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has just taken 96 billion quid of our resources, or will take 96 billion quid their resources. That's not putting things like whisky revenues and things like that as well. So there you have it, folks. Are you yes yet? Scotland's no skin. Because the money that we send to Westminster through direct taxation is what we run our country on, a proportion of. We're not talking about oil and gas revenues. No, we're not talking about alcohol duties. We're not talking about tobacco duties. We're not talking about fuel duties. We're not talking about VAT on energy costs here. They all flow into the English Exchequer without being credited to the Scottish budget, the Scottish people. They're no Scottish resources as far as they're concerned. They're theirs. Anyway, twice what they buggers give us back of our own money to run Scotland will be taken from Scotland and other taxes, such as oil and gas and renewable energy. Scotland's not too poor, too wee. It's just a wee bit on the stupid side. We had 2.4 million idiots voting their wallets last time, knowing that their wallets were empty because of what they were voting for. Spanners. Oofed. Anyway, moving on, Monday, back here in Scotland, and the trial of Warm Homes prescriptions is deemed to be a success. Now, to be fair, this wasn't just being trialled in Scotland, it was being trialled in England as well. Somerset, I believe. Anyway, here in Scotland, 28 families had their energy bills paid on prescription. And the idea is that during the winter, when certain illnesses flare up and people require hospital treatment, it would be cheaper just to keep them in their houses and keep their houses warm. Anyway, the academics who are looking at the study and running this scheme have said that in England, the Warm Homes prescription, where people with chronic illnesses that are affected by the cold, would save NHS England 860 million quid a year in people being in hospital and requiring treatment. So keep them in their warm houses, save 860 million quid a year by paying their energy bills. Here in Scotland, the proportionate share would be 80.6 million quid a year. So it would actually save money by paying people who have chronic winter illnesses, by paying their electricity bills and their gas bills to ensure that they have warm homes, because it will keep them out of hospital where it is costly to keep them and costly to heat them. So the scheme is now to be rolled out here in Scotland to a further trial of 1,125 people. I don't know what they're doing in England. But the trial goes on here to see if it will actually save money in hospital time and things like that. And if it does, it would be a good idea to roll it out. But as you know, we're moving towards a wellbeing society. I keep speaking about this wellbeing society. And it is the Scottish Government's policy to create a wellbeing society. You know, that's why we have things like the baby box. It's why we don't pay bedroom tax. It's why our council tax is cheaper. It's why our young and our elderly get a free transport on the buses. Is to keep money in people's pockets. Money in people's pockets can be spent into the economy, and the people's well-being is better. They can have better food, better housing, better heating. They can heat themselves. You know, a healthy, fit, educated population whose needs are met is exactly what society is supposed to provide. And that's what we're trying to create here in Scotland. And the Warm Homes prescription will be another step along that road. We're doing quite well within the confines of devolution. But imagine what we could do with the full powers of independence. And I've just spoke about 96 billion quid, which would have been staying in Scotland over the next 2 years if we had been independent. But no, it's not staying in Scotland. It's gone to Westminster. And we're getting budget cuts. There you go. 96 billion quid. We get 41.6 billion quid to run our full nation this year. Wow. Right. Moving on, Monday, and the EIS is looking to settle its dispute with the local authorities over pay and conditions. But Scotland's second biggest teachers' union, the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association, announced dates for strike action. COSLA is working at a pace on a new offer to teachers to try and avert strike action. Now, with the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association buckle if the EIS accept a trade deal? Aye, probably. EIS is the biggest of the unions when it comes to it. It's the Education Institute of Scotland, EIS, just in case you didn't know. Okay. Right, moving on. Monday, here in Scotland, another scare stories fronted by the BBC. Christ Project Fear is well underway. Started off with two-tier health system and a Scottish Government plan to charge the wealthy when it's nothing to do with the Scottish Government whatsoever. An absolute bollocks piece of propaganda. Well, here comes another one. Oil and Monday, Offshore Energy UK tells us the cost of decommissioning of oil and gas wells over the next 10 years will be £20 billion. The oil and gas sector are expecting state aid to do this work. They're not getting it, but they're expecting it. This is why it's a scare story. The BBC are trying to say it would cost Scotland £20 billion to decommission these wells. Nothing to do with the people of Scotland or the Exchequer here in Scotland. Or in Westminster, giving them tax relief on these things as a choice. Generally, when you allow mineral extraction, you make them buy insurance policies to cover these costs of putting things back to where they were before they started. All right. As I say, this is an anti-independence story, trying to scare us into thinking we couldn't afford the broad shoulder, we couldn't afford decommissioning in the North Sea without the broad shoulders of the UK. Let Davy make this quite clear for anybody out there who doesn't quite get it. They put it in. They've extracted the oil and gas and made massive profits down through the years, 40 odd years and 50 years of them now. Well, the oil and gas sector in the North Sea will pay to take the crap out that they put in. And if they don't, we will hunt them down and we'll drag them into the Scottish courts and we will prosecute the executives. We will strip the companies of their assets and we'll jail the buggers. They don't want to clean up their mess, but they want to reap the profits. The Scottish taxpayers no paying it. The oil and gas giants will pay it. This is just another bloody scare story. All right. Anyway, apparently there's 2,100. Get your head wrapped in this. This is the thing. There's no oil, no gas. There's no 2,100 wells to be decommissioned over the next 10 years. It cost us £7.8 million per well. Of course, that'll go up as we get into the 10 years. Right, moving on. Monday, back here in Scotland, and the first family-friendly drug rehabilitation centre opens in Ayrshire. The £8 million Harper House facility in Ayrshire opens and it allows children to remain with their parents as their parents go through rehabilitation to get them off drugs. Now, as I say, the facility will accept families from across Scotland, and it's part of the Scottish Government scheme to tackle drug and alcohol addiction in Scotland. Now, I wish the centre well and every success, I really do. But as to the wider issue about alcohol and drug addiction, it's going to get worse, folks. It's going to get worse as we get into more poverty and austerity 2.0. Getting drunk and getting stoned as a form of self-medication to take you to the reality of the fact that you can barely feed yourself and your children. The alcohol and the drugs don't help, but they mask it for you. Because there's a cost to alcohol and drugs which should be spent on the children that you're worried about not being able to feed. So as poverty rises, alcohol and drugs problems right across the UK will rise too, and we are seeing it rising rapidly in the northeast of England. Right, also Monday, EIS Chair Andrea Bradley schools BBC Scotland on who is responsible for cuts to the education sector. In an interview with the BBC, she was asked about cuts to education by the Scottish Government. So, Miss Bradley doesn't miss them for the law. Aye, there's cuts coming to the Scottish Government, but where's the Scottish Government's budget coming from and who's cutting it? Basically, Andrew Bradley points out, actually, the cuts are coming from Westminster, they're not coming from Scotland. And as we've just spoke about, 96 billion quid of our resources being stolen by that shower of thieves and carpetbaggers down that road, with nothing coming back. You can see that if we were independent, the cuts wouldn't be necessary. Okay, anyway. Also Monday, on the Pravda Papers Review, Susie Boniface, economist, tells the BBC that the UK debt is a myth. Something that I've been saying. Something that Richard Murphy's been saying. Okay. She tells the BBC and the wider public that austerity is a choice and that the national debt is a fallacy. Okay. Governments are not households, she tells the BBC. She tells the BBC that if you go to your bank and you tell them you've used up all your money, gives more, the bank says, bugger off, come back when your salary comes in. She also points out that when the UK government goes to the Bank of England and says, give me money, the Bank of England is legally required to print that money and give it to them. And it never ever has to be paid back. Why does it never ever have to be paid back? Davy's explained this a million times. It'd be like Davy going to the cash point machine, taking 20 quid of his own money out and leaving an I owe me 20 quid on the cash point machine. If I'm borrowing money from me, I don't have to give it back to me. And that's why UK national debt is a fallacy. The Bank of England, which is 97% owned by the people, look it up, 1947. It's all to do with what I was talking about. That was a pre-runner of the reform of the House of Lords, actually, so that they could print the money to create the welfare state, which is no longer there. Anyway, she points out that the money we owe it to ourselves, so we never have to pay it back. The notion of national debt is just rubbish. Absolute rubbish. You print the money, you spend it on something within your national, within the nation, and you either create an asset or you give it to the people who spend it and you tax it back. There isn't a national debt as such. What we have is 2.8 trillion having been stolen from the public purse and squirreled away offshore, rather than circulating within the economy. All right, moving on. Monday. Where are we? No, that's it. That's what I've got for you. 47 minutes in. Let's check the papers, that way we can go on with the rest of the day. Let's see what pishes in the papers. I hope you found the stories I picked out to talk about entertaining. I hope you found them informative. All right, here we go. Scotland's papers for Tuesday morning. Two-tier NHS talks and stop teacher strikes. In sickness and in wealth. This is an out-and-out lie. The First Minister made it quite clear. This is the Daily Record, by the way. The First Minister made it quite clear yesterday on television, on the BBC, over her dead body, with the founding principles of the NHS be scrapped. The founding principles of the NHS, healthcare, free at the point of need. And we actually have that here in Scotland, because we don't pay for prescriptions. So, we've got a lie as the headline in the Daily Record. Actually, they want to hunt down that wee middle manager, get him on the telly, and sack him in public. And tell every other middle manager in the NHS, you come up with bullshit ideas like that, well, we're in charge. You won't be working in our NHS. But what's more important is, people seem to be a bit stupid here in Scotland. Because I remember last week, the First Minister telling the people of Scotland that in an independent Scotland, she would write the protections of the NHS into a written constitution for Scotland, keeping healthcare in Scotland free at the point of need forever, and set in a written constitution. So it is a bollock story, it's a made-up story. The Scotsman has Scotland at risk of sleepwalking to two-tier NHS BMA. No, it's a lot of bollocks. Actually, we know what happened at that meeting. At that meeting, some idiot made the suggestion and the whole room fell about laughing, because they know that the Scottish SNP Green government would never agree to such a thing. How these minutes of some middle manager's meeting made it into the hands of the BBC is going to be highly suspect in the first place. NHS at risk. That was a Scotsman. What we go, the Press and Journal, NHS risk at sleepwalking into charging patients cash. No, it's no. It isn't. Another bollocks lie. And of course, the Scottish Daily Mail, right-wing gammon rag, just a wee step about that much above knuckle dragger this paper. Its sister paper, The Express, is knuckle dragger territory. Anyway, a bombshell memo reveals health chiefs talk over wealthy paying for treatment, Tories warn. Tories can warn all they fucking want. They're the ones that are privatising the NHS. In England, the NHS doesn't get money for patients. The money's allocated to a patient, and wherever the GP sends them, that's who gets the money. And as GP surgeries doing that road are owned by private conglomerates, they're sending their patients to private hospitals. So the NHS has been defunded in that road for those who don't know about it. Anyway, this is rubbish. You can't trust the SNP with our NHS. So Tories want to privatise it, but it's the NHS's fault. It's the SNP's fault. But of course, as we see, this didn't come from the SNP. This came from some little middle manager at a little middle managers conference from NHS boards. Just find a little NHS manager, drag him in front of the television and sack him and make it clear to all the rest of the middle managers. You try. You want, just tell them straight, okay, you're now free your responsibilities in the NHS. You want to charge people? Here's a platform, run for public office. But while there's SNP Green governments in public office, there will be no two-tier charging for the NHS in Scotland. The Looney Rag, the knuckle draggers gammon rag. The Scottish Daily Express has SNP government must step up to stop teachers' strike. Well, actually, that's what they were doing over the weekend. We'll see what the EIS has to say when they put the new offer to the members. All right, the Tory graph has Starmer, UK must wean itself off migrant labour. Rishi Sunak to the CBI yesterday. No opening up to Labour and no opening the labour market up to people from elsewhere. Suck it up, buttercups. This morning, Starmer, nay, opening up to immigration to ease the problems in the labour market. You couldn't put a fag paper between the two cheeks of the establishment arse down that road. The Times has tailor-made treatments to improve cancer care. Life expectancy could double in a decade. In a decade, I think in a decade's time, hopefully cancer will be something you take a pill for. And the other headline in the Times is a more honest headline, and that is Sturgeon rejects talks of NHS fees for wealthy. The Herald has staff and vessel shortages to hit oil well phase out. I guess that's a story on decommissioning. Yep. The Herald reports that the Trade Association Offshore Energy UK, which I've just spoke about, says that a shortage of workers and vessels could hamper plans to decommission 2,000 North Sea oil wells. Very good. The National has, we all have Judgment Day job to do. Message for Chapman as SNP MPs and activists to gather at court for India F2 ruling, and more speakers and other rallies added. And the other headline in the National is baloney, no plans for charges in Scotland, NHS. And that's exactly what it was. Baloney made up crap. The unionists are shiting themselves. The game's a bogey. No matter what that court says tomorrow, the game's a bogey. They know it. All they've got left is the potential of frightening people into voting no again. And it doesn't look as if it's taken, actually. Right, and what's the star goat for us today? The Daily Star of Scotland. I'm a celebrity row. A scarlet eviction wasn't racism. TV host plays down social media storm. I have no idea what that's all about, but what they see is a coloured lassie and a purple dress on the front page here. I have absolutely no idea what's going on there. Okie dokie. Right, that's what I've got for you today, folks. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it informative. Now, as you can see, Project Fear is being ramped up. Propaganda is now being made up to go along with it. A bit like the Ferry story, a lot of pish. In fact, when you get right down to it, the running down of our services has got to do with centralisation, and it's being facilitated by the cuckoos in the nest, and it's being facilitated by the mainstream media, the BBC being at the forefront of it. So, is a campaign underway. Tomorrow will be a big judgment. Myself and the other Davey will be in Edinburgh. I'm sure Sarah will be with us because this is a big one. All right, now keep your eyes on the prize. You've got to debunk this stuff when people run about you talking about it, especially the stuff that's in the right-wing gammon rags. Right? Now, if need be, show them my videos. All my sources are checked. The information I give you is correct. Anyway. Sorry about that. How unprofessional. Should have switched my phone off. Size and the prize. Learn how you go on. He's got out there and won hearts and minds. Okay. Support the independent media, support Broadcasting Scotland, Independence Live. You know the script. Calgon Media, the iScot magazine, national newspaper, and independent bloggers and bloggers. If you've got a crowdfunder on the go and you've got a Sheco expert, throw it in the pot. These guys do great work. But hey, as you know, I don't want your money. If you like what I do, I just ask you to share it across your social media platforms. If you're going to share it on Facebook, give me 5 minutes after this broadcast to change the sentence to public. All right. And finally, health restrictions. There isn't any. There's only a bit of guidance. So if you're in an enclosed public space, mask up. And clean your hands and surfaces regularly. That's the last 2 bits of guidance. Now, this is important, folks. If you're feeling under the weather and you're out in public, please mask up, show some social conscience, and look after your fellow citizens. And if you're a health and social care worker who's still using NHS lateral flow tests, please submit them to NHS Scotland as you live in our communities. And as we get into the deepest, darkest parts of winter, when respiratory illnesses are at a peak, then we need to be able to track this virus. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Plan is to be back tomorrow to do it all again. That's the plan. Let's hope it works out. Catch you all tomorrow.